this podcast, I have a slew of Q&As to answer, like the best place to sell some of my cards, the best cards to buy right now, and a whole lot more. And hi, welcome to episode number 33 of Beyond the Game. If you don't know who I am, my name is Eric Michael, and I've been buying and selling sports cards for the past 10 years of my life. And for the past 4, I've been teaching people just like you how to make an income with sports cards. It changed my life for the better when I bought my first sports card all the way back in 2015 of Steven Matz, who used to be a big prospect for the Mets. I flipped it, made a few $100s on it, changed my life, and I'm on a mission to help it change as many of your guys' lives as possible. And today marks a big day. I'm going to explain to you why, for a very stupid reason. So a few years ago, I got hair transplant surgery. My hair was thinning. Okay, it was thinning. It wasn't too bad, but it was getting there. And I learned about this thing called hair transplant surgery. And I was like, whoa, it's not terribly expensive. You could get surgery and you have hair 6 months later. Sign me up. So I did it 2 years ago or 3 years ago, May of 2022. 6 months later, boom, full head of hair. I was like, wow, this is great. Hair was pretty good. 2 years later, June of 2024, for some reason, I'm on the phone with the surgeon because I made friends with him. He was like, Eric, sometimes people get the surgery a second time and it looks even better. I was like, really? Boom, sign me up. Flew up to New Jersey, got it one more time. And today marks the first day I finally have enough hair to put my hair up in the hairstyle I like to do. Very stupid thing, but to me, it makes me happy. Let's get into some questions. There's a lot of questions. This person made his name Poop McPoopy Pants. Do you agree vintage cards are better being graded through SGC and more modern through PSA or Beckett? Any thoughts on the newer grading companies? I hear one makes their labels look like the cards. Like cracked ice cards will have sort of matching labels. All right, so there's a lot to unpack in that question. So PSA, in my opinion, and not really my opinion, but in general, is just better overall, vintage or modern. Beckett, you can't really get there anymore. So here, let me instead of me, trying to talk about it, let's go to an example. So I'm sharing my screen here on my iPad, and let's take an example of let's do a 1955 Koufax. I believe that's his rookie. Am I wrong here? Nope, I'm right. And let's do a PSA 2. Let's just make something up. PSA 2. Let's click compare, and also let's do an SGC 2. And SGC 2, and let's compare. So if we go to the chart here, if you see, so this isn't the best chart, but if you look at the bottom, you could see a PSA 2, the average in the last 30 days does about $590, and for PSA 2, and the average in the last 30 days of an SGC 2 does $540. And generally what I've seen is vintage cards with PSA will outsell by about 10 to 20%. It depends on the card. Also with these vintage cards, like from the 40s and 50s, like I don't know if you guys know this, but like what you could have happen. So like let's say, right, we have a 1955 Koufax, right? Just like I just showed you, right? And you have a PSA 2. And let's go back to market movers real quick, right? Let's go to PSA 2. And this is a nice graph of a PSA 2. And look how crazy this is, right? It's like all over the place, right? You had one that sold for $470, then boom, $565, then $650, $620, $585. So it's all over the place, right? And so, right, you have one that sells for $450. Then you have another that sells for $675. And then you have another that sells for $550. And the reason is because if you have a card, this is my best drawing of a card, right? And then we have, up here, it says PSA 2. So not all PSA 2s are made equal. If this was a card of Victor Wembanyama, for example, or a modern card, any PSA 10 sells for about the same. They all look the same. But PSA, not PSA, but with vintage cards, the centering, right? The centering, I don't know what I'm trying to draw here, but the centering, right? And the coloring makes a big difference, okay? So you could have a PSA 2 where the corners are a little bit better, but the centering is just not that good, and people care. So like, here you go. This is a good, people care about two things with vintage cards the most. They care about centering the most, and also they care about color. They care about these two things the most in general. So if there's a PSA 2 with kind of shitty coloring and not that good of centering, but maybe the corners were a little bit better, so graded a 2, it's going to sell for maybe $450 as opposed to one that has better coloring and better centering, but maybe the corners are a little bit rounded, and that one might sell for $675, and maybe one that's in between might sell for $650. So that's why there's so much variance, but just generally speaking, poop pants, PSA is going to outsell SGC usually. But once again, this example I'm giving you, right? You could have a PSA 2 that sells for $450 and an SGC 2 that sells for $650 because not every grade of a 2 is made equal. So hopefully that makes sense. And any thoughts on newer grading companies? I hear one makes their labels look just like cards. Yeah, so I think you're referring to HGA, right? It's HGA. So newer grading companies are no good for the most part. They just don't sell for what you need them to sell for. Like, they'll just never sell close to a PSA 10. Like take this example. Like, sorry about that. The camera cut out there for a second. I had to swap cameras. But like I was saying, so you asked me on newer cards, best grading company. So here's a pretty standard example. If you're looking at the iPad here, so you could see, right, a Wembanyama Silver Prism PSA 10 while I'm speaking right now. The last one sold for about $760. It's about an $800 card, give or take. I wanted to short this card, but there's no way to short cards. You can see it's going down, right? SGC 10, which is like pretty comparable, right? The last one did $675, right? And a BGS 9.5, which is BGS is strange, but like right, does $468. So there's your answer. PSA is always going to outsell SGC and Beckett. Now, what I would say is Beckett does get a little strange because they have something called a BGS 10. So I don't even know if any exist. So like you could see a Beckett 10 with one of these cards. One sold for $2,500 recently, and then one sold for $6,000 way back when. But yeah, but a Beckett 10 is pretty rare, few and far between. So I wouldn't expect that to ever happen. You're usually going to aim for a Beckett 9.5 if you're sending to Beckett. Now, what I will say is check this out. So this PSA, I know this is going to sound strange, but PSA wasn't always the grading company to go to. Back in my day, which was like back in 2015, 2016, 2017, 18, and 19 before the pandemic, this is how sports cards work. And I'm going to draw this out for you. This is going to sound fucking crazy, all right? But I promise you, this is how it worked, okay? And this is why sports cards before the pandemic, it was easier to make money, but there wasn't as much money in it. So let me explain, okay? Let me give you guys a little history lesson here, okay? Pre-pandemic, let me explain to you my college years. This is how it went. This is a classic example, right? Let's say you buy card on eBay for, let's say, $200, all right? Now, what would happen when you buy this card on eBay? This is step number 1. Step number 2 is, this is what I would do. I would ship it straight to my buddy who lived in Texas. He lived near Dallas. Dallas is where Beckett's facility is, okay? So, and there was no sales tax on eBay for sports cards back then. So this $200 was just $200. It wasn't any more, any less. So I'd buy the card. It would go straight to Texas, all right? Now, step number 3, my friend would drive to Dallas every Friday, okay? And take all our cards, me, my friends, some other people. He would get a small discount, and that's how he would make money. He would give it to Beckett. Now, step number 4, I would use a 1-day grading service, all right? Once again, this doesn't exist anymore because it does, but it's way more expensive. And this used to cost me $20. But check this out. Beckett used to have something called minimum grade, all right? This is going to sound wild. But what minimum grade is you could say to Beckett, okay, take my card, grade it in a day for $20, but if it doesn't grade a 9.5, the minimum what I want it to grade, don't touch it, and they would only charge me $8, all right? So if the card is, right, less than a 9.5, this would be $8. If it is a 9.5, this would be $20. And the best part, right, I would have this sucker back in one day. And this $200 card, right, buy the card for $200. I would say 70 to 80% of the cards I would grade a 9.5, right? So plus $20 to get it graded, right? So my total investment into the card is $220. However, the downside is there wasn't as much profit. So this $220 card back in the pre-pandemic, I would sell for about, I don't know, right around like $350. So this was like how sports cards worked back then. And it was good in the sense where it was much easier to find cards to grade. Things would go so much faster. Like, you could see how fast I would flip cards. Just like, I mean, look at this crazy scenario, right? It's wild. You would just buy a card on Wednesday. It would get to Texas by Friday morning, and boom, it's graded by Friday evening. And you could just use this, this service over here. Oh, this is a bad arrow. This service over here, and you have it back, and if it doesn't grade a 9.5, you go and sell it. You lost $8, and you break even, and you move on. So this is how sports cards work during the pandemic. It was very convenient. And then the pandemic happened, and then this is what happened. So pandemic happened, and what happened during the pandemic is Nat Turner, who's a big collector, this really rich guy, Nat Turner purchased PSA. Oh, this is bad handwriting. PSA. Nat Turner understood what he was doing. He made it a little bit harder to get a PSA 10. He did some other things, and Beckett fucked up. They were taking super long to get people's cards back, and people are drifting more and more towards PSA. So now what happens is something like this, where you can see a Beckett 9.5 severely, it sells for like half of what a PSA 10 does. But back in my day, which was here, a PSA 10 would actually usually sell for a little bit less than a Beckett 9.5. And Beckett was way easier to get cards graded because you would just go crazy and send cards in really fast. And back then, PSA was like used more for like lower end, like bulk submissions, cards that were like $20-$30 not graded. Now PSA is just better for everything. But that's my history lesson. So that's how it used to work, and that was kind of the downfall of Beckett. Mark, that was a long question. Mark, I've come across a decent looking Desmond Bain card. Blue shimmer out of 35. Comps are pretty decent if I get it graded. However, there's no sales for about a year and a half. Will value hold? And it's just not a liquid card player? I don't really know what you're asking, but I'll tell you what I would do with it. I think that's what you're trying to ask. So you are, let's clear this. So Desmond, I'm assuming the card you're talking about is Desmond Bain, and this is a blue shimmer out of 35. I'm not good with this keyboard yet. Out of 35. This? All right, so this is what we're talking about here. So yeah, looking at these sales. So the last one did, right? So if we go to this chart, oh boy, this is not popping up on this chart. But let's go. So what I'm looking at here, right? So this PSA 10, there was a sale of $500 in. No, this is not helpful, but I'll show you what I would do. So there was a sale of $500 in, what was that, July 4th? Here, let me write this down. So this is a Bain out of 35 blue shimmer. So we just discovered that on 7/4/24, PSA 10, what was that? I think it was $500, right? So I'll tell you how I would evaluate this cards, right? So, and then we have a PSA 9, and this is just not helpful, but a PSA 9, and then raw. Okay, so raw this is more helpful. So raw, if you look down here, a raw sale did $153 April 7th of this year. So April 7th of 24, raw did, what was it, 150, right? 150. All right. So this is like the numbers you have to work with. And now I want to figure out, okay, so today while I'm speaking, it's November, and Desmond Bain's value could have went up, down, left, right. We don't know. So what I like to do is I want to go to a very common card of Desmond Bain to get an accurate indicator of his market. So check this out. This is a nice little hack. So Desmond Bain, and we could go to his Prism, right? Just a Prism. Let's do silver. Prism silver, PSA 10, okay? So this is a very commonly card sold. You can see there's a bunch of sales. There's going to be a bunch of sales of this card. So if we go back in the past 365 days, you can see, so right around when, so 4/14/24, one sold for $80, right? So let me do one of these. Whoop. So his silver PSA 10, silver PSA 10, and what was that? That was, this was 4/14 did $80, right? So 4/14, it did $80. And then going all the way to today, the last one did, yeah, they're still about $80, having a good start to the season. And then when I want to see, like, I want to look when one sold, when this card sold as well. So July 4th, right? Let's see, right around July 4th. So 7/8, it did 100. Is that right? Wait, I'm being sloppy here. 7/8, one did $70. Okay, so 7/8, one did $70. And then today, the last one did, I mean, I don't really, I'm going to be conservative here and say this card's worth about $80 today, even though the last one did technically 100. So today, this card is still about $80. So what this tells me is, just looking at this right here, right? Looking at that, what that tells me is, well, these sales, this sale right here, and this sale right here, his market really hasn't changed much since then. So to answer your question, Mr. Mark, what I would pay on it is, I want to at least double my money if this card grades the PSA 10, and I could expect to sell a PSA 10 for around $500. So I would pay, personally me, if this card was in good condition and like I thought it would grade a 10, the final answer is I would pay, or want to pay, $200. There's your answer. Hopefully that makes sense. A lot of math. But basically, I just figured out that the market has not changed. But sometimes, right, what will happen is I'll do this math right here, and I'll discover, oh, wait a second. There was a PSA 10 sale of, $500 all the way back a few months ago, but his market is actually down 30%. So, right, I don't want to use that as a sale because this market's different now. Hopefully that makes sense. Let's see. We have another question. Let's see here. Oh, yep. My knees are feeling it. I had a crazy leg day today. Hi, Eric. Do you buy sports cards already graded, or do you buy them and get them graded? Good question. So, me personally, I barely... Jesus Christ. I just fucking hit this thing. Me personally, for the most part, I buy cards graded already. So, because my time is just capped, I don't have the time to find raw cards, but I made all my money through my teens and early 20s through buying and grading cards. But basically, if you're newer to sports cards and 95% of people watching this, you want to be buying cards already not already graded, buy raw, flip, get graded, because basically, I love this fucking iPad. This is how it goes, right? You have two sides, right? You have raw, you have graded, right? In this scenario, let's say in both scenarios, right, you start with $1,000, right, $1,000. Now, raw, you can actually turn this $1,000 by flipping, getting cards graded, and 3 months later, let's pretend this is 3 months, you can actually turn this $1,000 into like $3,000. You can actually start with $1,000 and start making $1,000 to $2,000 a month. In this scenario, if you're buying cards already graded and you're good at it, you're making in 3 months, you're making 20 to 30% on your money, which is good. That's excellent money. If you go on Wall Street and tell someone you're making 20%, they'll think you're on crack. But, $1,000, 20%, well, a few months later, now you have $1,200. This is not making an impact on your life. This is making an impact on your life. So what I tell people and what my students do and what I did myself is you do this scenario, or you do this scenario, and then eventually you keep flipping and you're flipping and you're flipping and you're flipping, and then eventually you're going to have a bankroll, right, of $25,000 plus. And once you have $25,000 plus, it's hard to spend all that money on cards to get graded. And then you take some of this money and you start to do some of this. Whip. Buy cards already graded because, this is making you 20 to 30% on your money. And every 3 to 4 months by buying in the off season, buying low. And there's more to it. I'm making it sound simple. You have to actually know what the hell you're doing. But this is the natural progression, at least in my opinion, of buying and selling sports cards and the way to make money, right? So you start off with this, beep. And even if you have a lot of money, you should start off with this because prove it to yourself, prove it to your wife, prove it to your aunt, prove it to your uncle that you could actually make money. And then go to the graded strategy. Me personally, I'm fortunate where I have an excess amount of cash and I just don't have the time to do the first strategy. I do it once in a blue moon. So you notice a lot of the cards behind me, I buy already graded because this is the strategy I use, which is great money and it's fun too, right? Buy in the off season, sell before the season, make 20 to 30%. It's pretty solid. Hopefully that answers your question. NA, you didn't give your name. Sorry, you didn't give your name. All right, Vince. Hey, Eric, what are your key steps and procedures that you do to prepare a card for grading for a better possibility of grade a 10? So to be honest with you, I'm not an expert on this. I very rarely ever send cards in for grading, through me. I've always sent it to other people. If I were you, there's a guy online named Kurt's Card Care. I would look. I think he has a bunch of videos on what to do. I mean, there's videos in my program. The coaches teach the students how to do it, but personally, I'm not the guy to ask for that. I have very rarely done that. So, sorry, can't help you there. But go on YouTube. There's a guy named Kurt's Card Care. He will be better than I am. Bob, all right. If I understand you right, with your group, I assume by group you mean Major League Profits, my sports card coaching program. But group sounds more official. I like that. With your group, you can you control the amount of money that you receive for the card after you sell it. We don't. How do I know that the card wouldn't sell for a higher price a year after you already sold the card? Also, the so-called list of 100 cards for investing, I've never seen it. Is it possible to see? So, yes, we have a list of the top 100 best cards to buy in the program that updates every few days to every week. And if you're not in the program, you cannot see it because that's what people pay money for. And so I think you have it twisted on what we do. So we are a coaching program. And basically, so we have some resources and tools like you're talking about, and I'll explain it in a second. But what you're paying for is the knowledge, right? I've been doing this for the last 10 years, and instead of you having to scramble around YouTube and try to figure out what works and what didn't work like I did for years, you just pay us. We give you a step-by-step process and exactly what to do, so you don't need to guess, you don't need to think, do exactly as we say, and you should be pretty successful with sports cards. So if you're someone that values your time, then you want to invest money in skills and mentors to speed up your learning curve. If you want to figure everything out yourself and you're not someone that values your time as much, then I wouldn't do it. So that's what you're paying for. You're paying for the knowledge. But you're referring to our all-in-one service. So this is something people commonly ask me about, right? So we have something called an all-in-one service. And basically what this does is, so when you buy and sell sports cards, for the most part, it's a little, the pain in the ass part of it is you have to, here, let me do my little thing, right? So this is the usual process, and this is our process. The usual process, right? Buy card, and then get card in mail, and then ship to get graded. Next, grading company ships back. Number 5, sell it and ship it, right? This is the usual process, and I still have a lot of students that do this, and there's nothing wrong with this. However, this is what the pain in the ass is, right? To wait for the card to get in the mail, right? So you have to be home. Then you have to ship it to the grading company. This is also a pain in the ass. And then you have to get it in the mail again, right? And then you have to ship it again, right? So doing it this way, there's nothing wrong with it. Like, there's a lot of people that do it that way. I do it that way sometimes too. But you can't do this fully remote, and you always have to be home because you always have cards coming in the mail. You have to prep the cards, send them out for grading. Now, what this all-in-one service does, and what a lot of our students do, and what I've been doing for years, is, right, the way this goes is, right, you buy card, ship directly to service. Ours is in New York, right? Ship directly to our service. Service cleans, and that little plus sign is an and. Service cleans and ships to grading company. Number 4 is grading company ships back to service. Service sells card. Service sends you money. This is how it works. So this process right here, whoop-de-doo, right? You ship it directly to the service. So you buy a card on eBay, it literally goes right there. So you never touch it. And then, right, they clean it and they ship it for grading. And then once the grading company is done grading the card, usually PSA, right, they're going to ship it back to the grading company. And if you choose, what we do is we will sell the card for you. Okay, right? So we will sell the card for you and then just ship you the money. Now, there's some students in the program that don't do this, right? And they want the card shipped to themselves because that's actually the smarter move, selling it yourself and building connections and relationships, which is a whole different conversation. But that's how it works. And so you can literally buy a card, send it to our company, and they clean it, they send it in for grading, they sell it for you, and they just wire you the money. So you could buy a card, ship it, get it graded, all that stuff, and never touch it. Never touch it. Fully remote. That is how it works, and that's what you're referring to. Mr. who asked this question, Bob. And then when we sell the card, we have a massive eBay store. We just auction it. Or we could sell it or best offer, whatever you choose. But we don't control how much it sells for. Like, I can't just click a button and demand someone pay this. And how do you know? How do I know this card will sell for more or less in the future? You don't. But who knows? Most cards go down over time because most rookies just don't pan out. It's just how it goes. But hopefully that answers your question on how it works. N/A. You didn't put a name. I have 6 1952 Topps Mickey Mantle cards. What is the best way to sell? Grades PSA to 4.5. Okay, so those are some monster cards. And I would sell them through Goldin auctions. That's what I would do. Whoever your name is. I would sell those cards through Goldin auctions. I mean, those are some monster cards. Those cards are worth like 30, 40, 50 grand plus. So Yeah, you don't want to sell those yourself. Just sell it and get as much cash. You could send me a picture of them, and I could let you know what I think, because that sounds like you have a lot of money in cards. And if you don't know the best way to sell it, I want to make sure those cards aren't fake or anything. Cards look like 10s in pictures from eBay, only to arrive as 8s or 9s. Do I just take a hit and sell the raw cards below comps or in auctions, or do I sell it, buy it now, and try to get market value? So, all right, that's a question. So, Josh, the reason you're getting a lot of 8s and 9s is because you simply lack the skill to grade cards, to be frank with you. So you simply lack the skill. That's number one. So I would either watch videos, ask a mentor, or buy a program, mine or someone else's if there's another, to not waste your time and not lose money. And then what I do with my raw cards personally is, so I'll tell you what I do personally, and this may not be the answer for you, right? When I have a card, and let's say I buy it for $500 and it doesn't grade, and if I were to sell it right now raw, it would be like $450, $425, and I'll lose a little bit of money. Because I have the cash to back it up, I just wait till before the season so it appreciates in value, and then I usually end up making 10 to 20% on my raw stuff. I have a coach, his name is Joe, that does this really well. But that's not the answer for you if you don't have, because I could hold it because I have enough money. But if you're gonna, it's not worth it to hold $500 to make an extra 30, 40, 50 bucks if it's going to tie up your purchasing power, right? Because that money is better put into buying more raw cards to flip and get graded. So that's the answer you're looking for. But what I would say is, if you're in a bind, and it sounds like you are a little bit in terms of that, you're losing money, it sounds like it's stressing you out, I'd be more conservative with the cards I'm buying. So I'd make sure I'm getting an 80 to 90% value. So if I go to sell it and it's not worthy, or it doesn't look like the pictures, then I break even or maybe lose a little bit instead of losing 20, 30% every time, because I see that happen a lot. So that's what I would do. But you're asking this question, if you keep getting 8s and 9s, a picture is never perfect, but if you know what you're doing, you'll get about 60 to 70% of the cards to grade a 10. That's me personally. I have students that do get 80% plus of the cards they buy to grade a 10. And honestly, I don't even know how they do it, because I've never graded cards at a level that high. But all the cards are bought on eBay, some on Facebook. Most of my students buy cards on eBay. So that's what I would say. It sounds like you just simply lack the skill, just to be frank with you. But that's what I would say. All right. Next question. We got good questions here. So I got to take a sip. All right. I realize this is about cards, but I have a question about autographs. I grew up in the same town as Mark McGwire, so I have a few different things that he signed for me. I also have a Julius Erving auto on an Olympic Converse paper. Also, one of the autos from Mark is an Olympic folder. I also have a football which has 3 autographs on it. However, I've only figured out 1 or 2 of them, and the ball is deflated and needs to be repaired. My question is, what is the best way about pricing the McGwire and the Dr. J signatures, since they are one-on-one as far as I can tell? I've searched the internet far and wide, but nothing the same out there. Also, can I get the football repaired with the autos on it? How do I figure out who signed it? So, okay. So the football, yeah, it sounds like the football just needs to be pumped up. So just pump it up. You said it's deflated. Just pump it up. And the Dr. J McGwire autographs, so I wouldn't use the word one of one. They're not really one of ones. It sounds like if you just go on eBay, and once I have the iPad back, I'll show you in a second. But if you just go on eBay and you just search for Mark McGwire autographs, just on a brochure or paper or whatever, it probably sells for around there. And the only time it would get a special increase if Mark McGwire signed some shoes that he game wore or something like that. So to be honest with you, it doesn't sound like you have one-on-ones. And also what you want to do is get them authenticated. So you can send them to JSA or PSA and get the autographs authenticated. That's what you want to do, because no one's going to believe they're real until they are authenticated. But unfortunately, not to burst your bubble, they're probably not worth as much money as you think. They're not. Doesn't sound like they're that special. But I could be wrong. But yeah, that's my answer to your question. Daniel says, how do you sell your cards on eBay? Do you auction or buy it now? Also, how do you do shipping? Does it matter? 7-day versus 10-day auction? 7-day versus 10-day auction does not matter. It's the same crap. Whatever a card's worth, it's worth. And I only auction cards that are more common and I know what it's going to sell for. So a card that's more rare, like numbered to 25 or numbered to 50, I don't like auctioning them because at least in my experience, what I see happen is because no one really knows what it's worth and they're kind of hard to evaluate, right? People get trigger shy and they don't bid what they should. As opposed to like a Victor Wembanyama Silver Prism PSA 10, something like that. Well, people know what it's worth. It sells common, and I know before I auction that card around what I'm going to get. But I don't really auction much cards, but when I do, it's that. I'm auctioning cards I know what I'm going to get for rather than me guessing. Because if people have to guess, they're not sure what it's worth, it's usually going to sell for a lot less than you think. So, yeah, hopefully that answers your question. Roy says, I used to collect cards as a kid, so I have a lot of those overproduced cards. Yep, a lot of people do. Unfortunately, I sold most of them in bulk a few years ago. I wouldn't say that's unfortunate because most people can't even sell them. Of the cards I have left, some of them could be worth something with a decent grade. Am I better off trying to pick the possible 10s out of the bunch, getting them graded, or should I just sell everything off I have? I have an O-Pee-Chee 1979 Ozzie Smith, a 1992 Mia Hamm Sports Illustrated for Kids card. I have the Muhammad Ali Olympics card. I have a few of the newer cards as well. Okay, so those cards from the 80s and the 90s are just extremely difficult to get graded. Like, because they're flimsy, they get damaged easy. So that's the problem you're going to run into. I have a common rule when I'm grading cards. I want to at least double my money. So, for example, let's take this Mia Hamm card you're talking about. Even if you think it's in perfect condition, I would assume it's going to grade a 9. Never assume something that old is going to grade a 10 because it's probably not going to. So what I would do is assume it's going to grade a 9. If I'm going to net at least $40 at grading a 9, then sell it or get it graded. If not, I wouldn't get it graded. And that's it for the questions. Hopefully you enjoyed that. And if you're watching this on YouTube, like, comment, subscribe. If you leave comments, I try to answer as many of the comments as I could in the following podcast and answer any of your questions on this nice, beautiful little iPad I got next to me to give you as much value and detail as possible. But if you're watching this, like, comment, subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.